We're joined now by Weil, a student and writer at the University College London. He writes about sexuality, health, science and technology. Ben, thank you very much for joining us. From what you're hearing, how difficult is it for people to access the monkeypox vaccines?
Well, as we know at the moment, there is vaccine scarcity, which is kind of the rate limiting step in terms of acquisition of the vaccine in this country. So at the moment, people are only being offered one dose of a recommended two-dose regimen. And as we've heard, that's being focused on high-risk groups like men who have sex with men, who comprise 98% of infections at the moment. But sadly, yes, it is incredibly difficult to get an appointment at the moment. There's sort of two predominant approaches that seem to be being taken, which is appointments available to book by telephone consultation, or kind of mass vaccination events that are happening on the weekends at places like Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital. But ultimately, the government have enormously failed in terms of centralising and coordinating a vaccine response. I mean, we're hearing that, as you heard in the VT, that queues for vaccines at these mass vaccination events can take up to 3 to 5 hours. And we already know that this kind of first come, first served or scattergun approach is going to be serving the most well-off in affected communities. That means people who don't have to work weekends, who have very flexible job schedules, they're not working 0-hour contracts. And as people like Will Nutland from the Sexual Health Campaign Prepster have pointed out, you also have to be happy to be spotted in one of these queues, sort of outed as somebody who's at high risk of monkeypox. And that doesn't apply to a lot of men who have sex with men for a lot of reasons. It's firstly not just gay and bisexual men who are at high risk. As well as this, the vaccine appointment systems are incredibly inaccessible for the disabled. I mean, it's very, very difficult at the moment for deaf people to get appointments when telephone consultations are often mandatory for booking. We've also just heard, literally just before I came on air, that these mass vaccination events at Guy's and St Thomas's have been changed. They're now going to be appointment only, which again is going to have an impact in terms of who can actually access the vaccines. It's going to be first come, first situation.
So Ben, what do you believe, just briefly, would be the optimal way of rolling out these vaccines, bearing in mind we've already seen how effective a mass vaccine rollout can be during the pandemic?
Well, ultimately, and firstly, the UK government have to listen to the plea from the sexual health and HIV sector that we need more vaccine. I mean, they've ordered 100,000 doses that are going to arrive in September. This is a sort of unacceptable shortfall. The BASHH have estimated, I think a really conservative estimate, that we need at least 250,000 doses in order to fully vaccinate 125,000 of the most at risk of monkeypox in this country. And that's a shortfall. Again, that's a really conservative estimate. That's a shortfall that wouldn't even vaccinate once. I mean, a sixth of men who have sex with men in this country. But we also need really targeted vaccine services. We need to be reaching out to communities. We need we need vaccine programs to be centralized. As I said, there hasn't been a coordinated response. It's still incredibly difficult for people to find out where vaccines are available. Again, as we heard in the VT, particularly for people who are outside of London, it's basically nigh on impossible, for instance, for people in Greater Manchester to get a hold of the vaccine. One of the reasons for this is that vaccines are currently being offered through sexual health services, which are supported by local authorities, which, as we know, have had their budgets cut enormously. So people are trying to access vaccines through enormously eroded and underfunded provisions. I mean, in Greater Manchester, before this crisis, it was very difficult to get a sexual health screening, let alone now a vaccine in the middle of a crisis. So we need funding to those areas too.
Ben, thank you very much for joining us to highlight this. Really good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Ben Vyle, thank you.